When someone is naturally kind-hearted and always willing to help, it can be easy for others to take advantage of that generosity. At first, the acts of kindness might feel fulfilling and rewarding, but over time, some people may begin to expect that kindness without appreciation or reciprocation. Instead of seeing your good nature as a gift, they may come to rely on it as something they're entitled to. This can happen in various aspects of life, including friendships, romantic relationships, family dynamics, and even professional settings. For instance, you might notice that certain people start to ask you for favors more frequently than they would ask others because they know you'll say yes. They might assume you will always adjust your schedule to accommodate theirs or lend a hand whenever they need help without even considering how this affects your own time or energy. This often occurs subtly over time as people begin to expect you to be available and giving, leading to an imbalance in the relationship. The situation can get worse if you don't set boundaries early on. The more you give without standing up for your own needs, the more some people might push their limits, testing how far they can go. It may reach a point where you're left feeling that your kindness is being used against you, and yet you continue to help out of a sense of duty or guilt. Often, the fear of disappointing others or being seen as selfish prevents kind people from saying no when they need to. Unfortunately, this opens the door for others to exploit that tendency, turning your kindness into a one-way street. Being taken advantage of in this way can lead to burnout and resentment. You may begin to feel unappreciated or even invisible as your efforts go unnoticed, and the people around you only continue to expect more. Your own priorities, time, and well-being become secondary to the demands placed on you by those who rely too heavily on your generosity. As a result, you may start to feel overwhelmed, exhausted, and drained, both emotionally and physically, because you're constantly giving without receiving the same level of support in return. In the worst cases, this can create a cycle where you feel trapped, unable to step back because of the relationships you've built around being the kind one. Breaking this pattern requires setting firm boundaries and learning to recognize when someone is taking advantage of your kindness rather than appreciating or reciprocating it. It's important to remember that saying no or prioritizing your own needs doesn't make you unkind. It means you're practicing self-care, which is essential for maintaining healthy relationships and personal well-being. When you consistently prioritize the needs of others over your own, it's easy to fall into a pattern of neglecting your personal well-being. This often happens when someone feels compelled to be there for everyone, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, or even strangers, without taking the time to care for themselves. At first, it may seem noble or selfless to always put others first, and in the short term, it can give you a sense of purpose or fulfillment. However, over time, this constant focus on others can take a significant toll on your physical, emotional, and mental health. One of the most common outcomes of always prioritizing others is that your own needs go unmet. You might find that there's little time left for you to focus on important aspects of your life, such as pursuing your personal goals, enjoying hobbies, or even getting proper rest. Small acts of self-care, like taking breaks, eating healthy meals, exercising, or simply relaxing, can get pushed aside because you feel obligated to be available for everyone else. As you continue to put others first, your energy reserves are depleted, and the exhaustion starts to build. You may not realize it at first, but slowly the lack of self-care begins to impact your ability to function at your best. Another downside of constantly prioritizing others is the emotional strain it can cause. When you're so focused on making sure everyone else is happy and cared for, it's easy to lose touch with your own emotional needs. You might bottle up your feelings or ignore your own struggles because you feel that there isn't room for them, or because you've convinced yourself that your issues are less important than those of the people around you. This emotional suppression can lead to feelings of frustration, resentment, or even sadness as you realize that your efforts to help others have left little space for you to address your own concerns. Over time, this can create a sense of emptiness or unfulfillment as you wonder when, if ever, you'll be able to focus on your own happiness. Moreover, the habit of neglecting your own needs in favor of others can affect your relationships. Initially, you might believe that constantly helping others will strengthen your bonds with them, but the opposite can occur. If you're always giving without allowing yourself time to recharge, it can lead to burnout, making it harder to maintain healthy, balanced relationships. Over time, this imbalance may cause tension as you feel increasingly overwhelmed or undervalued. You might even start to feel resentment toward the people you're helping, not because they've done something wrong, but because you haven't given yourself the space to take care of your own needs. In this way, neglecting yourself can actually harm the very relationships you're trying to nurture. Neglecting your own needs also has long-term consequences on your mental health. When you constantly sacrifice your own well-being, it can lead to feelings of low self-worth. You might start to believe that your value lies solely in how much you can give to others, and you may struggle to see the importance of caring for yourself. This mindset can create a vicious cycle where you feel guilty for taking time for yourself, which only further perpetuates the neglect. As a result, stress, anxiety, and even depression can develop, leaving you emotionally drained and unsure of how to regain control over your life. Ultimately, while it's admirable to care for others, it's essential to recognize that you can't pour from an empty cup. If you continually neglect your own needs, you'll eventually find yourself running on fumes, unable to provide meaningful help to others or yourself. The key is to strike a balance, understanding that your well-being is just as important as those you care for. Taking time for self-care, setting boundaries, and learning to say no. When necessary, are critical steps in ensuring that your kindness doesn't come at the cost of your own health and happiness. By taking care of yourself first, you're not only better equipped to help others, but you also create a more sustainable, fulfilling life for yourself. When one person in a relationship, whether it's a friendship, romantic partnership, or even a professional connection, consistently gives more than the other, it can create an imbalance that disrupts the natural flow of mutual support. In the beginning, acts of kindness and generosity may be well-intentioned, but over time, if one person is always the giver and the other the receiver, the dynamic can become skewed. This imbalance may not be noticeable at first, especially when the giver is happy to help and doesn't expect anything in return. However, as time passes, the lack of reciprocity can lead to unhealthy dynamics that harm the relationship. For the person who is constantly giving, there's a gradual sense of carrying the emotional or practical weight of the relationship. Whether it's always being the one to initiate plans, offer help, or provide emotional support, the giver may begin to feel like the relationship is one-sided. This can manifest in various ways, from being the person who always listens and provides comfort during tough times to being the one who consistently adjusts their schedule or sacrifices their own needs to accommodate the other person. While these gestures of kindness are often made with love or goodwill, over time they can lead to feelings of exhaustion and depletion if they're not reciprocated. One of the more insidious effects of imbalanced relationships is that the giver may start to feel taken for granted. The recipient of their kindness might begin to expect that the other person will always be available or willing to give, rather than appreciating the effort involved. This expectation can become a pattern, where the receiver stops considering the impact their requests or needs have on the other person, simply assuming that the giver will always be there to help. As this dynamic becomes ingrained, the giver may start to feel unappreciated, as though their kindness is no longer seen as a gift, but rather as an obligation. For the receiver, this imbalance can foster dependency. When one person is constantly on the receiving end of kindness, they may come to rely on the other for support, rather than developing the ability to manage challenges on their own. In the long run, this can stunt personal growth for the receiver, as they don't learn to navigate problems independently or reciprocate in the relationship. While they may not intend to take advantage of the giver, the imbalance creates an environment where they are less likely to contribute equally to the relationship, leading to a lack of personal accountability. As the relationship continues in this unbalanced state, resentment can build. The giver may start to feel as though they are being used, even if the other person doesn't mean to cause harm. This sense of being undervalued can create emotional distance between the two, as the giver withdraws to protect themselves from further exploitation. They might also begin to feel frustrated, wondering why the other person doesn't offer the same level of care and consideration in return. These feelings, if left unaddressed, can lead to conflict, with the giver finally expressing their frustration in ways that might seem unexpected or out of character. At that point, the receiver might feel blindsided, having been unaware of the strain their behavior was placing on the relationship. In some cases, the giver may internalize the imbalance, believing that their worth in the relationship is tied to how much they give. This can lead to feelings of insecurity, as they may worry that if they stop giving or start setting boundaries, the other person will no longer value the relationship. This fear can trap them in a cycle of overgiving, where they continue to prioritize the other person's needs at the expense of their own well-being just to maintain the connection. Unfortunately, this only deepens the imbalance and prolongs the unhealthy dynamic. Another consequence of imbalanced relationships is that they can erode the giver's sense of self. When someone spends so much time and energy focused on the needs of another person, they may lose sight of their own identity and what they want from the relationship. This can lead to a loss of confidence or a diminished sense of autonomy, as the giver becomes so wrapped up in fulfilling the other person's needs that they forget to pursue their own goals and desires. Over time, this can cause the giver to feel disconnected from their own sense of purpose, leading to feelings of dissatisfaction and regret. To prevent or address these imbalanced dynamics, it's important for the giver to establish boundaries early on in the relationship. Boundaries allow for healthy give and take, ensuring that both parties are contributing in ways that feel fair and supportive. It's also essential for the giver to communicate openly about their needs and to express when they feel overwhelmed or underappreciated. While it may feel uncomfortable at first, having these conversations can help prevent resentment from building and allow both parties to work towards a more balanced, reciprocal relationship. For the receiver, it's important to develop awareness of the other person's contributions and to make a conscious effort to give back in meaningful ways. Whether it's offering emotional support, sharing responsibilities, or simply expressing gratitude, these acts can help restore balance in the relationship and ensure that both individuals feel valued and respected. Ultimately, imbalanced relationships can be draining and damaging if left unaddressed. By recognizing the signs of imbalance early on and taking steps to create a more equal dynamic, both individuals can enjoy a healthier, more fulfilling connection where kindness and support are mutual. When someone is known for their kindness and prioritizes maintaining peace and harmony in their relationships, they often suppress negative emotions such as anger, frustration, or disappointment. This tendency arises from a desire to avoid conflict and ensure that others are not hurt or upset. While the intention behind this suppression is often to preserve the relationship and protect the feelings of others, over time, it can have significant negative effects on both the individual and the relationship itself. Suppressing anger or other negative emotions might feel like the kind thing to do in the moment, especially if you're trying to keep the peace or avoid making others uncomfortable. You might tell yourself that it's not worth expressing your frustration or that your feelings are less important than the happiness or comfort of those around you. However, constantly bottling up these emotions doesn't make them disappear. Instead, they build up inside, creating a reservoir of unresolved tension. The more you suppress these feelings, the more they accumulate, and eventually this internal pressure can lead to emotional outbursts or passive-aggressive behavior. One of the immediate consequences of suppressing negative emotions is internal stress. Emotions like anger and frustration are natural human reactions, and when you don't allow yourself to process them, it creates an emotional dissonance. You might feel as though you're forcing yourself to be calm or pleasant on the outside, even though you're experiencing turmoil on the inside. This disconnect between your true emotions and the persona you present to others can create chronic stress, as your body and mind are working overtime to keep everything contained. Over time, this stress can manifest physically, contributing to headaches, muscle tension, digestive issues, or even more serious conditions like high blood pressure. Another significant impact of suppressing anger is the effect it can have on your sense of self. When you consistently put aside your own feelings for the sake of others, you may begin to lose touch with your own emotional needs. You start to feel disconnected from your authentic self because you're not expressing your true emotions or standing up for what you really think and feel. Instead, you might become overly accommodating, molding your behavior to fit the expectations of others, which can lead to feelings of emptiness or dissatisfaction. You may begin to wonder why, despite your kindness, you feel so emotionally drained or unfulfilled in your relationships. In addition to the internal impact, suppressing negative emotions can also create problems in your relationships. While you might think that hiding your anger or frustration is protecting the relationship, it often has the opposite effect. When you don't express your true feelings, it prevents others from understanding your needs or knowing when something is wrong. Over time, this lack of communication can create emotional distance as unresolved issues build up silently beneath the surface. Your partner, friend, or family member may be completely unaware of the negative emotions you're harboring, assuming everything is fine while you're struggling with unspoken frustrations. This emotional buildup can also lead to passive-aggressive behavior. When you suppress anger, it doesn't just go away, it often seeps out in indirect ways. You might start to express your frustration through subtle digs, sarcasm, or withholding affection and attention, rather than addressing the issue head-on. Passive aggression is a way for suppressed anger to find expression without confronting the issue directly, but it often confuses and frustrates the other person, leading to misunderstandings and further conflict. Over time, this behavior can erode trust and intimacy in relationships as it creates an environment where open communication is replaced by hidden resentment. Another long-term consequence of suppressing anger or negative emotions is that it can damage your ability to assert yourself. The more you avoid expressing your true feelings, the harder it becomes to advocate for yourself when you really need to. You might become so accustomed to putting others' needs before your own that you lose the confidence to stand up for your boundaries or speak up when something is bothering you. This can lead to a pattern of self-sacrifice, where you continue to prioritize others at the expense of your own well-being. In the long run, this can cause feelings of powerlessness or even resentment toward the people around you, as you feel increasingly trapped by your inability to express what you really want or need. Suppression of negative emotions can also have an impact on your mental health. Over time, unaddressed emotions can lead to anxiety, depression, or chronic stress. When you're constantly repressing your feelings, it becomes harder to process them in a healthy way, and the emotional burden can start to weigh heavily on your mental well-being. You may find yourself feeling overwhelmed or constantly on edge, unsure of how to handle the buildup of unresolved anger or frustration. This can lead to feelings of isolation, as you may withdraw from others rather than confronting the emotional issues at hand. One of the most important things to understand about anger or any negative emotion is that it serves a purpose. Anger, for instance, is often a signal that something is wrong or that a boundary has been crossed. It's a natural and healthy reaction when you feel mistreated or frustrated, and suppressing it only delays the resolution of the underlying issue. By ignoring or minimizing your anger, you miss the opportunity to address the root cause of the problem and to communicate your needs to others. Healthy expressions of anger, when done constructively, can lead to positive changes in relationships, as they open the door for honest conversations and solutions. To break the cycle of suppressing negative emotions, it's important to learn how to express your feelings in a healthy and constructive way. This doesn't mean reacting impulsively or lashing out in anger, but rather finding ways to communicate your emotions assertively. Start by acknowledging your feelings to yourself rather than pushing them away. Recognize when you're feeling frustrated or upset, and give yourself permission to experience those emotions without judgment. Once you've identified how you're feeling, try to find a calm and thoughtful way to express those emotions to the person involved. Use I statements to communicate how their actions are affecting you, rather than placing blame or escalating the situation. Learning to express negative emotions in a balanced way helps prevent the buildup of resentment and fosters more authentic, healthy relationships. When you're able to voice your feelings honestly, it creates a space for open dialogue and mutual understanding. Rather than bottling up emotions and allowing them to fester, you give yourself and others the chance to address problems before they escalate. This not only strengthens your relationships, but also supports your own emotional well-being as you learn to honor and express your feelings rather than hiding them.